Here's the English translation of the provided text, with punctuation added. This was the most arrogant thug I'd ever seen on the subway. He wouldn't let anyone share his train car. As soon as he got on, he kicked everyone else out, saying, "This train car has been reserved by me." A few young men, greatly displeased, were about to make a move but were held back by their friends. This was because they knew this thug, his father was an arms dealer. This also made him even more arrogant and conceited. But when he turned around, he saw an old homeless man drinking on the subway. Seeing this, he became furious. "Don't you know I've reserved this whole train car?" But he had no idea that when this old homeless man was rolling in the Jianghu martial arts world/underworld, he was still in diapers. The thug tried to snatch the old man's wine bottle, but this touched the old man's limit. Because he loved wine more than his life, his previously hazy, drunken eyes suddenly became incredibly sharp. But clearly, he didn't want trouble, so he let go, allowing the other person to take the wine bottle. His subordinates were watching, and to regain his honor, how could he solidify his position as the big brother if he didn't teach this old homeless man a lesson? So he turned back and continued to provoke the old man. Unexpectedly, the old man suddenly stood up. 6 seconds, it only took a total of 6 seconds, and all the thugs were knocked down, unable to get up. The thug was scared to death. Who exactly is this old man? And at this moment, the old homeless man also looked very surprised. Clearly, this was just his instinctive reaction. Very quickly, everyone was taken to the police station. Seeing the thugs beaten black and blue, policewoman Carter suggested they go to the orthopedic trauma department for a checkup. After reviewing the subway camera footage, Carter realized that the person who beat them was an old homeless man. This made her a bit confused. Although the old homeless man was the aggressor, she didn't feel any aversion towards him. Even she wanted to give that arrogant thug a beating. Based on the old man's unusual fighting style, Carter realized that he must have been trained in the military, very much like a retired Army or Special Operations Force Unit 1 member. But the old man still refused to reveal his identity. Carter reached for the glass of water the homeless man had just drunk. His fingerprints were clearly imprinted on it. The wandering old man was very observant and immediately noticed this, but he didn't care. Very quickly, the police obtained his fingerprints. When comparing his fingerprints with those stored in the database, Carter was incredibly surprised. Because even they couldn't investigate his identity. But these fingerprints had appeared at multiple crime scenes involving violence, and he was even wanted by 4 countries. Just then, a lawyer entered the police station and pointed to the old homeless man. The old homeless man was bailed out by the lawyer, but the lawyer only took him to 2 burly men. By the time Carter rushed out to check the situation, the old homeless man had already gotten into a car and left. He was taken to a man who could accurately state the old homeless man's name as John. John knew that he was formerly a CIA agent. He had a past as a special operations veteran with glorious achievements. But John no longer seemed to trust the government, no longer believing that what he had done was right. Coupled with the unexpected death of his girlfriend, Jessica, John suddenly lost all motivation to live. From then on, he went into hiding, living in a haze of alcohol every day. John didn't know that the government and his colleagues at the CIA all thought he was dead. The fact that this man knew him so well surprised John. The man introduced himself as Finch. He realized that in John's current state, no amount of medicine or the best doctors could cure him. He needed a purpose, or more precisely, a job. Finch told John that in New York, every 18 hours, someone dies in an accident, and among them are inevitably people injured in criminal cases. Finch had a list, and on that list were people who were about to become victims of impending violence. But the people on the list knew nothing about the upcoming accidents. Most of them were ordinary people, for example, this woman Den, whose name was at the top of Finch's list. She might be about to be involved in a violent incident. But the important thing was that even though Finch had the list, he didn't know what kind of accident would happen, where, or when. Finch asked John, if you could know in advance who was about to be in danger, would John be willing to intervene to prevent those violent incidents? John found it hard to understand. Did Finch think he was a god? How could a human predict things that hadn't happened yet? It seems Finch is even crazier than me. I think you should see a psychiatrist. After that, John left. Suddenly, he was stopped by 2 burly bodyguards. When John returned home, the TV was reporting on his subway attack, and also on the fact that he was wanted by 4 countries. To avoid trouble, he cut his hair, shaved his beard, and changed his appearance. Now, no one could recognize him as the homeless man from the subway anymore. In his dreams, the figure of his girlfriend Jessica frequently appeared before him. It wasn't until he was woken by the ringing of his phone that he realized he was tied up. And on the other end of the phone was Finch's voice. Finch said to John, even if John believes whether or not I have a machine that can predict impending crimes, can he calmly watch ordinary people about to be killed? This is clearly psychological manipulation. At this moment, outside the door, there were sounds of a woman screaming and a man yelling. Guessing that a domestic violence incident was happening outside, John quickly smashed the glass door, used a shard to cut the ropes, and rushed out. He found that a 3-year-old recording was playing outside. When he was in this room, the husband cruelly murdered his wife to defraud insurance money. Finch said, "You couldn't save yourself 3 years ago, just as you couldn't save your beloved girlfriend Jessica when she met with an accident." John was on a mission on the other side of the earth. Hearing this, John immediately lost control. Finch quickly explained, no matter how messed up your life becomes, your inherent desire to help others in your heart will never change. John asked Finch, "Who exactly are you? Why do you know so much about me?" Finch said he didn't belong to any gang, just a third party cooperating with the government. Finch kept persuading John, "You couldn't save the woman who was killed here 3 years ago, you couldn't save your girlfriend. But if you can know about impending criminal cases, you have every opportunity to save one victim after another." With that, Finch took out a picture of the girl Den they had seen yesterday. This girl was about to be involved in a violent incident, and John had a chance to prevent everything from happening. John had many questions in his mind, but finally, he agreed to cooperate with Finch. Finch took John to a secret base. This was a closed bank, which from the outside looked like an abandoned building. Even now, John couldn't fully understand what was happening. Finch prepared 6 driver's licenses and 6 credit cards for John to conceal his identity. This process was almost identical to the procedure when John was still in the CIA. At this point, John realized that a wall was covered with densely plastered profiles and documents of the people on the list. In addition, the list Finch mentioned consisted of social security numbers. Through these social security numbers, they could investigate the person's identity. Among them, many people had already been identified with corresponding violent incidents, they had become victims. John asked Finch, "Where did you get this list?" But these matters were no longer important. Too many victims on that list had already died. The next victim was Den. Starting from John's involvement, they would try their best to prevent violent incidents from happening. Den was an assistant prosecutor with a very high conviction rate, so countless criminals hated her and wanted to kill her. Finch didn't know who would attack her, nor did he know the time or location of the attack. So, he just told John to use all his learned knowledge to conduct the investigation. Until now, John still doubted Finch's ability to predict the future. But out of curiosity, he decided to join Finch. With many years of experience working in the CIA, investigation was a very familiar task for John. After a few days of investigation, John identified 2 suspects. One was Den's ex-boyfriend, Weir, who was also a lawyer cooperating with her. For some unknown reason, Den suddenly suggested breaking up, but Weir was unwilling. He had always tried to find a way to salvage the relationship. Weir was divorced and had a child, and he was paying monthly alimony. His career was hindered and not developing, and it seemed he was on the verge of bankruptcy. All of these could be Weir's motives for the crime. The second suspect was Pop. He was the one being prosecuted by Den. Pop was a drug dealer. During a transaction, the 2 sides turned on each other, and Pop killed the other party, seizing the goods and $500,000. Den was prosecuting Pop, and it was very likely that this would make Pop's gang retaliate against her. At that time, Detective Frusco, who specialized in investigating drug crimes, was present at the scene and exposed Pop's crimes. Although Pop confessed to all the charges, Den always felt there was a hidden agenda behind it. So, Finch monitored Den going to the detention center to meet Pop privately. Den learned that Pop was just taking the fall. Pop had a younger brother, and this was the person Pop cared about most. Den also confirmed that Pop confessed to protect his brother. And John overheard all of this. After continuous probing, Pop secretly admitted that he was taking the fall. His brother saw someone kill the criminals and steal both the goods and the money. To prevent his brother from being hunted down by the real culprits, Pop decided to confess and go to prison in place of the real culprits. But Pop remained silent, refusing to reveal anything. Because all those people had power and strong connections. Pop refused to talk to Den anymore. And John and Finch now understood the whole story. Now, only by finding Pop's brother could they know the true identity of those criminals. Soon after John monitored Den, he found that Den's ex-boyfriend, Weir, was extremely concerned about Pop's case. After Den left, he sneaked into her office and began looking through the files she had investigated on Pop's case. Now, it was unclear who wanted to harm Den, but the motive was certainly related to Pop's case. John decided to find Pop's brother first to find the real culprit in Pop's case. Unexpectedly, when John saw Pop's brother, the latter immediately became highly alert and ran off. When John finally stopped him, he immediately called for help from those around him, saying someone was trying to kidnap him. With no other choice, John simply dropped his phone into Pop's brother's backpack. When questioned by the people around him, "What are you doing?" John had no choice but to let Pop's brother leave. Now, they could eavesdrop and locate Pop's brother through John's phone, so John was not in a hurry. Now, what he was eager to know was whether Finch belonged to any government organization. Since Finch couldn't provide John with weapons, he planned to get some equipment from the military arms dealers there. At this moment, he learned that the thug he had beaten on the subway was Anton, the son of the arms dealer. So, John could buy a gun for free. Anton had no idea that John was targeting him. He was with his father, being guided step by step into the family's military arms dealing business. While the father and son were showing various weapons to a customer, John arrived uninvited. "Hey, Anton." Anton no longer recognized John. John said, "These weapons are all good stuff." But before he even got close to the guns, Anton's father's men had already drawn their guns and pointed them directly at John. Anton was terrified. John calmly picked up the gun, put it in his pocket, and then amicably bid Anton farewell. After getting the weapons, Finch immediately gave John some bad news. According to Pop's brother's location displayed on the GPS system, he had been kidnapped and locked in the trunk of a car. Moreover, Pop's brother's location was not far from John's. Pop's brother was kidnapped by a bald man and his men to threaten Pop. So that after the verdict, they would kill Pop's brother to eliminate all traces. But they didn't know that John and Finch had overheard everything. John, wearing a hood and holding a smoke bomb and a shotgun, silently waited for the car carrying Pop's brother to pass by. A smoke bomb was fired, and the bald man and his subordinates couldn't dodge the shot. The car immediately lost control. John immediately switched to his shotgun, took down one subordinate, then used the butt of the gun to knock out the bald man, rescuing Pop's brother. John checked the bald man's badge and discovered that the other party was Steele, a detective specializing in drug crimes. John immediately followed Steele. He was surprised to find that Detective Fusco, who testified in Pop's case, was Steele's accomplice. Now, John and Finch finally understood the whole story. Steele's group was a corrupt police force. They got information about drug deals, so they killed everyone involved in the transactions to seize the goods and cash. At this very moment, Pop's brother saw these things. To prevent his brother from being killed by Steele to silence him, Pop had no choice but to take the fall. They claimed to have killed the people who came for the transaction. Given the current situation, Den was the one always trying to investigate the truth. This threatened Steele, so he decided to kill Den. John asked Finch, "How could you predict that Den would be involved in this case?" At this point, Finch revealed that he was the director of a government technology company. To eliminate terrorists, they monitored people's phone calls and emails. After analyzing the collected data, the government could identify terrorists before they committed crimes. This way, the government could stop them before they attacked people. The inventor of this data analysis system was Finch. But this system could not only identify terrorists but also ordinary citizens who were about to be involved in criminal cases. At first, Finch thought the system was faulty, but after some time, he discovered that the people selected by this system had indeed been involved in criminal cases. But the government only cared about terrorists, not ordinary citizens. They said this was a natural development of society. But Finch didn't think so, which is why he came to John. He hoped that with his financial and technical resources, plus John's outstanding abilities, they could do their best to save people. But now, what bothered Finch was that even with a list of people involved in criminal cases, he still didn't know what would happen, where, when, or what form the crime would take. Currently, the top person on the list was Denver. Although Finch and John still had too many questions, they had no choice but to follow what the machine suggested, protect Den's safety, and then figure things out later. Policewoman Carter, at the beginning of the movie, had also received news that Anton was attacked. A man in a suit, by himself, took down 6 burly young men. His fighting style was very similar to the old homeless man on the subway. Who exactly was this man in the suit? On the other side, Finch monitored that Pop in prison had been assassinated. It seemed that after Pop's brother was taken, to be safe, Steele's group decided to kill Pop to eliminate any witnesses. On another note, Den received a phone call, and the other party arranged to meet her 20 minutes later. John immediately sensed the impending danger. He drove and followed Den to a secluded alley. John was fully armed and waited quietly. A minute later, Steele and his subordinates entered from the back door. John thought Steele wanted to kill Den, so he immediately prepared to protect his target. Unexpectedly, after seeing Steele's group, Den suddenly became very friendly with him. "What's going on now? Is there a problem?" "The problem is that idiot. He knows. I can handle the file, but tonight you guys absolutely have to deal with Weir. Suddenly, Detective Fresco, who testified against Pop in court, rushed out and brought John in front of everyone. That night, John wore a mask when he attacked Steele, so no one here recognized John. Steele even thought John was from a drug trafficking organization, sent to seek revenge because he had stolen their goods and money. Den didn't care who John was, she demanded that Steele secretly deal with him and Weir, who had been secretly investigating her. I have to deal with Weir. It seemed that the person behind all these incidents was Den. Steele used the butt of his gun to knock John unconscious. When John woke up, he had been taken by Detective Fresco, who was preparing to eliminate him. John learned through conversation with Fresco that this man was Steele's subordinate. After Steele used his position as a police officer to commit crimes, Fresco reluctantly followed Steele because of money. You work for money, and I work for loyalty. What's the difference? The difference is I can spare your life. Hearing this, Fresco laughed. John said, I still have a lot of things to do in the future. I need a police officer to be my inside man. I want Fresco to work for me. Hearing this, Fresco felt as if John was an idiot. He was about to die, yet he was talking so grandly. John immediately taught Fresco a lesson: next time you handcuff someone, handcuff them in front. After catching someone, you must frisk them. With that, he took out a stun grenade. Fresco's car immediately lost control, rolled over, and flipped on the road. John crawled out of the car, dragged Fresco out to get the keys, then took Fresco's gun. He asked Fresco, are you wearing a bulletproof vest? If so, I'll have to give you a few shots so Steele won't suspect you when you get back. John immediately called Finch. Den is not the victim, she's the mastermind of this incident. The two of them protected the wrong person. This system selects people involved in cases but cannot determine who the real victim is. Tonight, Weir is Steele's target. At this moment, Steele had arrived downstairs at Weir's house. Weir's residence was a dumpster area, with no cameras and no security. Every evening he would go out to play baseball. This place was perfect for Steele to carry out the assassination. Steele had brought a thug and planned to deal with Weir first, then him. This way, Steele could pin the blame on the thug. What everyone didn't expect was that Weir lived with his son, but Steele didn't care, he was prepared to deal with both father and son. Steele took the thug's hand and forced him to point the gun at the elevator. As soon as Weir and his son stepped out of the elevator, he would immediately open fire. At this moment, John had already sneaked inside, holding a gun and restraining the subordinate, forcing him to throw away his gun. Then he stared at Steele, shaking his head, signaling that he must not take action. Steele's unexpected plan was disrupted. At the peak of tension, Weir and his son appeared at the elevator door. He was even planning to take his son to the baseball field to play. As a result, the son carelessly dropped the ball at John's feet. At this point, both sides were at daggers drawn. John smiled at Weir's son. Both Weir and his son didn't know what had happened. Just like that, the two father and son safely left the building. At this moment, John demanded that Steele release the thug first. Of course, Steele didn't agree. If the thug reported to the police, he would be in big trouble. The subordinate monitoring from upstairs rushed out and was immediately subdued by John. He fired, hitting his thigh. John told the subordinate he was threatening to take his comrades to the hospital, while he stayed to continue wrestling with Steele. Suddenly, a few gunshots echoed from the living room. A moment later, the thug ran out. It seemed John had dealt with everything. The very next day, Den was still in court handling another case. Weir was supposed to have been killed by Steele last night, but today he was sitting there unharmed. This made Den a little uneasy. Den sent a message to Steele, demanding a reasonable explanation. When the incriminating recording was played, the sound on the recording terrified Den. Tonight, deal with Weir, do it cleanly, then we'll settle up. Steele didn't expect that it was evidence proving he had killed to silence witnesses. John knew he had completed his mission. He stood up and left the courtroom. As Fresco got into his car, he saw John had been waiting in the car for a long time. He had dealt with Steele. Now both the police and criminal organizations were looking for Steele. The police thought he had fled out of fear of punishment, while the criminals thought he had joined the police's witness protection program. No one investigated Fresco. John told him to continue working with peace of mind. Fresco wondered, where did Steele go? John said, he's in your car trunk. This sentence scared Fresco half to death. John used Fresco's gun to kill Steele. This time, John had Fresco by the balls. John ordered Fresco to dispose of Steele's body. Later, when he needed Fresco, he would contact him directly. This time, even though they protected the wrong target, they still achieved a perfect outcome. All the bad guys were punished by law. Den's ex-boyfriend was a good person. He found suspicious points in Pop's file and had always been secretly investigating Den. John and Finch successfully prevented Weir's assassination. This proved that although the machine could not distinguish between perpetrator and victim on the list, it accurately predicted the crimes that would occur. John decided not to live in alcohol anymore. He would join Finch and do his best to prevent crimes from happening. It's just that if they keep doing this, who knows what the final outcome will be. Sooner or later, they will die. At that point, they will truly die. But John was already desperate to die anyway, so for him, the outcome no longer mattered. Carter led the raid to arrest Steele's subordinates. She was extremely curious who the mysterious person who had destroyed their network was. But the subordinate knew that he only felt John was a demon in a suit. John silently observed everything, beginning the long journey of preventing crimes from happening. With that, part 1 of the thriller also concludes. Do you think this movie is good? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the movie? Please send your answers in the comments section below and let us know. Thank you for your interest and attention.